He's a man's man. He's a ladies' man.
Oh.
He's a family man. He's a sailor man.
Popeye, the sailor. Popeye, the sailor. Popeye, the sailor.
It's Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall, the eye-popping entertainment of the year, Popeye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson. Here tonight, we are going to be continuing Robert Altman month by discussing Popeye. Please leave a 4 or 5 star review to help people discover the work that we are doing here at the Not Content Podcast as part of the From the Q Podcasting Network. You can follow me on social media, BlueSky at Jerome C 1985. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for notifications. My co-host, as always, is Brian. And Brian, here tonight we are going to be discussing the 1980 Popeye movie, a boondoggle, a movie that did not do well financially. And as mentioned at the end of last week, kind of every notable director from this era, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, they all had like their boondoggles. And this definitely was the one for Robert Altman. But I'm here to tell you, Brian, I think everybody else is wrong on this one, including you. I think it's me and Roger Ebert. We are riding the Popeye the Sailor Man flag.
Listen, I like this movie, but not a lot. I think just the movie seems like it's built for kids, but it's really not built for kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like Robert Altman growing up as a child was a different kind of child. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't your standard kid. And I think Robert Altman growing up just was like smarter than everyone else, which is why I think he made this kid's movie for a kid like himself and not an actual everyday kind of kid. Does that make any sense? Like, this is made for smart asses, I think. And not only that, I think you need to watch this movie with subtitles because the first couple times I watched this movie as a kid, it's just very hard to understand the dialogue. But if you put on the captions, the closed captioning, you see the dialogue in full detail, and it actually makes a lot more sense. And there's a lot more hidden jokes, like by Robin Williams and his muttering, than you think, because there's just so much muttering in this movie that it's hard to follow. But at the same time, like I said, once you put on those subtitles, it's like a totally different experience. So again, you couldn't do that originally when the movie came out, and there wasn't closed captioning on any of the VHS releases. So I think that's part of the issue as to why some of the people didn't get on board with this movie. But at the same time, I love the visual of this movie. I love the wackiness. I can't believe how many extras were doing bumps. Like, literally, extras were just doing bumps in the background of this movie, breaking things. I made the joke that this is a messy movie. Messy because something is breaking every 10 seconds, but in a good way, because this is like actually reflects the chaos of the cartoon, so to speak. Like, we can get to the cartoon in a few minutes, but I just want to say, like, I wasn't a big fan of the cartoon as a kid. We were kind of talking about this before we got on air, but at the same time, like, I wasn't against Popeye. I loved the fighting aspects of Popeye, because usually every Popeye cartoon ends with a big fight or a big, high spot or something like that. Of course, this movie ended the same way. So expectations kind of were met in terms of that idea. Everything else was kind of like a setup building to the last 20 minutes where you just wanted to see Blue to get his ass kicked. So in terms of that, it was fine. I like the mystery with the dad that kind of held my attention. Other than that, I think I would have cut some of the songs, because some of the songs seem kind of like filler. But at the same time, I can't help but think that this movie takes place somewhere in between the Nashville and McCabe and Mrs. Miller universe, somewhere in between. Because, again, it just feels like you got this wacky cast in the background, that's an ensemble cast, that they're just kind of excelling in the shadows, so to speak, because it just seems like everyone is like on top of their physical comedy game, but everything's going so fast that it's hard to notice and appreciate. So that's why I think this is a movie you need multiple viewings of, you need the subtitles on, and I think you need the IMDb cast list as well, because you're gonna be recognizing faces, and they're gonna be gone and then coming back, and then you realize, oh my God, is that Paul Dooley? Out of, as the burger guy, and I was like, holy shit, yeah, that is Paul Dooley. Knock on wood, the dude's 96 years old, so hopefully he's going to be still alive by the time this podcast is released. But man, there are some people in this movie that are still alive, and I'm shocked that they're still alive, considering how old this movie is.
Yeah, I mean, you had Roy Walston as the father, just absolutely nailed the cast. I mean, we have to start with Shelley Duvall as Olive Oyl. I mean, she was born to play this role. And I literally could not see anybody else playing this. Like, you look at any modern actress today, like I just don't see anybody who could do this role. Like Shelley Duvall, like looks exactly like how Olive Oyl should look, and I kind of feel the same way about Paul Smith as Bluto. Like he literally looks exactly like Bluto should. You also have, as you mentioned, Paul Dooley as Wimpy, another really good casting choice. I think this movie is able to capture the feeling of the cartoon in a way that no other movie of its type has been able to do. And it's funny to me that Robert Altman was able to do it, given like what we saw with Nashville. Like Nashville is this very like hyper realistic like dialogue where they're talking over each other, cutting from scene to scene, and like it's this very realistic thing. Even MASH kind of feels the same way. And then you got this movie where there's wacky bumps and there's like somebody literally gets kicked off a ship and like it flies like 30 feet in the air. I mean, Robin Williams is doing his Robin Williams thing. You got so many people just flips and flops, and this is it's a genuinely insane movie, and I am here for it. I really love the fact that we have this movie because I think the difference between a movie like this and Super Mario Brothers is even though Robert Altman is who he is, I guess he would say I am what I am, right? But anyway, so I think that what the difference between something like Super Mario Brothers and this is, I think the director understands the source material and is able to make a movie that still feels like it's of this world, but also kind of wacky as well. Where Super Mario Brothers, the 1993 version, was just completely out of pocket in terms of tone and in terms of a lot of the casting decisions. Like Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo do not have the feel or look of brothers. It's just a huge mismatch. Dennis Hopper's Koopa, kind of a weird decision, but I think with this movie, they nail the casting, and I think this movie is also really funny. Like Donald Moffat as the taxman, that is a great running joke throughout the movie, and the way that it pays off. Like part of me is wondering, like, was Robert Altman, was he audited in the 70s just like Vince McMahon was, and that's why we had IRS? Is the taxman IRS's father? Like, these are the questions that were going through my mind as I was watching this.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked at like the running gag of it all, and then all of a sudden, like he just kind of gets a bump at the end and kind of goes away. I think he just falls in the water, and then there's no more taxes. It's just really interesting because I don't even remember that tax character. I think they just made it up for this movie because there's nothing like that in the original cartoon. It's just basically Bluto and Popeye. So I thought that was a really funny social satire kind of gimmick, right? And it's a good recurring joke throughout the movie, and then everyone's kind of joking like they're broke by the end and like they don't have any money for any taxes. And then the idea of like a moving out tax and a moving in tax, and it's just like, God, I don't know. What's the phrase that we like to say on this podcast, Jerome?
The view never changes, baby. The view never changes.
Exactly, because it feels like, because it is tax season right now when we record this, and I'm doing my taxes, and so far I'm looking good. But you never know with some of these hidden fees and hidden taxes kind of things. So I get the
and
joke.
Being in the lovely state of California, they're going to get theirs.
Yeah, that's going to – we'll see how the state taxes affect me because the federal's looking good. But the state, we'll see because there's some things I got to fill in still. But renter's credit is one of them. But, yeah, I just think that tax dude was just so funny because it's such an adult joke that the kids are not going to understand. Again, it's that sense of humor where I think Robert Altman grew up as a really smart-ass kid as to my theory as to why this is like, he thinks it's a kid's movie when it's really not. It's more like a satire, if anything. But it actually matches.
I think that's consistent with what Robert Altman does, right? Like Nashville is a satire. MASH was a satire. McKay and Mrs. Miller was an anti-Western. So that it's definitely been a theme.
For sure. And I think that works with his style. And I'm pretty sure, like, I guess, if you want to talk about the box office and the disappointment about it, this budget was $20 million. It grossed 60, but I guess it had higher expectations. And I don't know. Just to me, it was kind of ridiculous because this movie went like twice over its budget in terms of the ROI, in terms of getting its money back, but it still wasn't enough. And it led to Robert Altman going to London or going back to England and kind of like being a recluse and doing projects over there as opposed to being an
I
ambitious
mean, it's
Hollywood
utterly insane to me that this guy. I mean, the movie made, and again, I'm not. I don't pretend to know the exact finances, but I mean, the movie made $60 million. It's not like this was a complete bomb. This wasn't. This wasn't Heaven's Gate. Like that movie legitimately lost a lot of money and almost bankrupted a studio. Like it's just it's so weird to me. Like the cross currents of this movie because you not only have Robert Altman having to go do his thing overseas for a decade and basically be persona non grata. But like Shelley Duvall, I think we could look back and everybody loves The Shining, and this is intended to be a big blockbuster. I mean, this was Shelley Duvall's peak, and she never hit this again. Like her star was severely reduced after this, and it just feels like the movies that we've been watching her in, like we saw her literally kind of moving up the card, so to speak, and this was kind of her main event performance. And I think I think she's really good in this movie. And of course, I mean, she's excellent in The Shining as well. But man, it just feels like it's like after this, you know, like she does Time Bandits. I mean, that movie wasn't exactly a big deal. It's depressing to think that she would never hit this peak again. Because again, I think she really does a great job as Olive Oyl, and of course in The Shining.
Yeah, she's great in this. I think the lifts do help because look, I mentioned this in Nashville. Like she's not that tall, but when in Nashville she looks so tall because of the lifts. They did the same effect here, and because she's so thin, she just looked exactly like the character from the cartoon. So I thought that was just really well done in terms of her dress. And I was getting confused because I thought maybe this was like a joke in the cartoon that I never noticed, but like her blouse looks like it's on backwards because the buttons are on the back. But Jerome was just telling me it could be the style of the time, and I'm just like, I guess so, because that means it would take two people to put that thing on when it looks like you just need one. But I don't know if that was a joke or not, and then we just didn't realize it now. But it does. I'm assuming maybe she's not wearing her shirt backwards, but if you look, people, like the buttons are on the back, so make your own judgment. But in terms of the casting, yeah, this was fantastic. Robin Williams, I thought was perfect. Good God, I mean, the guy held his eye closed for the whole movie, so I can only imagine how much that affected like his equilibrium in terms of like looking, because like if you put an eye patch on and you don't need the eye patch, and you have 20/20 vision, it's gonna fuck up your equilibrium because it's like you're like depending on one side more so than the other. So I can only imagine like his balance was kind of off during some of those scenes, but at the same time, like he was able to nail it and still get like the one-liners and like the little inside jokes. And that's why I mentioned the subtitles, because there's so many things that he's saying that kind of go over your head when you're a kid. But then if you look at the dialogue right now in front of you, it's like, wow, he's got all these little quips here and there that you don't even notice. So I highly recommend watching this, especially the Robin Williams scenes with the subtitles, man, because there's so many things you're missing. And it's that Robin Williams humor where he's just so quick-witted, and I don't know if it was more improv than what was on the script or on the page, but it just feels like it has that Robin Williams intuition of like knowing what to say at the right moment, making it seem like it's authentic and off the cuff. But maybe that's just a delivery style that he has, and that's why we love him so much. But yeah, I think the casting too for Bluto, Paul L. Smith, I looked it up just to make sure, and he was never a professional wrestler. And it's just like, dude, what a missed opportunity, because this guy in late 70s, early 80s would have been a perfect guy to put up against Andre and like MSG or like the Spectra or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe even the AWA would have been fit. Actually, he would have fit more in the AWA now that I think about it. With like all the big guys in the AWA back then. And so it's just so weird to me that like this guy had this career, but he could have done so much more, I think, in wrestling. But again, it's 20/20 hindsight, so you never know. But this guy's got this heel look that's so incredible. It's like you could have made him like the third natural disaster. It's like earthquake, typhoon, and Bluto, and it would have just made sense. So he's just such a great casting. But the only thing that I think was missing was the height, because Bluto is like 7 feet tall in the cartoons or something like that, because he always overtowers Popeye, but he didn't tower over him in this case. But that's fine. He still had the size. He still had the intimidation factor. And I love the fact that everyone in the town is like scared to death of this guy. And he's like running the town. And we don't even know where this town is, right? Like, it's not even said that it's America. It's like, I mean, we know they filmed this in Greece or something, or Malta. but we don't actually know where this like seaside town resides in. So it's kind of this open fantasy world too. So I like that interpretation. Like it's not necessarily America, it's not necessarily Europe, but it's this this town, this seaside town that has to band
But the
together at times.
interpretation is that Popeye is an immigrant. That's the way that I read this movie, is that Popeye is designed to be an outsider looking for his
Yeah,
dad,
like a
and
gypsy
somehow
going
he's a
from town
father by
to
the end
town.
of it too.
Yeah, gypsy going from town to town is kind of what I interpreted. Because at the beginning, it's like he lands in the town, right, and he starts getting taxed immediately. So he's not born in the town, but he's looking for his dad, quote unquote, his pappy, and he just feels like he's there. My pappy's here somewhere, and then you kind of forget that plot line, and then it kind of goes full circle towards the third act, which I thought was a really good twist because I was like, what's up with this dad storyline? Where are we going to go with that? And then
It actually pays off really well.
yeah,
It
yeah.
really does.
And they mentioned the Commodore. So
I want to point out Siskel and Ebert both gave this a thumbs up, so not just Ebert was a fan. So I'm going to go hang out with Siskel and Ebert in the balcony, and everybody else can hate on this movie. So in terms of the music, I don't think the music is perfect. Like I said, this movie is not perfect, but I enjoyed this far more than I expected. Like I went into this thinking, kind of dreading it, because it's like I know the reputation of this movie. This movie's a huge bomb, and I have watched a number of the other boondoggles that the directors have made. I mean, New York is not great. 1941 is borderline unwatchable. So I kind of went in dreading this a little bit, and like I said, I was extremely impressed, and I've come out the other side thinking this movie does not deserve the reputation that it does, and I still very much believe that, because I think that this movie is able to do some things that I think would be much more appreciated today, in terms of the music, in terms of the setting, in terms of some of the comedy. I think that that this movie is so complicated, because you've got so many crossroads. Like, think about this. You've got Shelley Duvall kind of in a huge moment for her. Robin Williams is a TV star, kind of transitioning into movies. Robert Altman is probably doing the biggest movie of his career. Robert Evans is literally getting arrested for cocaine. So there's a lot going on. Like, this is a co-production of Paramount and Disney, of all companies. Like, this movie is made because Annie was bought by another studio, so that's why it becomes a musical. This is just a profoundly bizarre movie in so many ways, and yet somehow I still think, I think it's messy, but I still think that the musical element works. But it's weird. Like, of all the movies to get made, like a Popeye movie, it's kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe Popeye was bigger in 1980 than it was in 2025. Like, I don't feel like Popeye is a huge deal. I feel like a lot of those classically animated characters are not huge deals now, and I don't know. It's hard for me to get a read on this, because it's 2025 and I don't know how to see that with perspective.
well, if you want to go deeper into the lore and the pop culture at this time, in 1981 a game came out that was called Donkey Kong, right? And originally it was supposed to be a Popeye game. So I don't know if this was supposed to be a time with the movie, or it was just this resurgence of the popularity because of the movie. But because of this popularity of Popeye at the time, unintentionally gave us Donkey Kong, because apparently it was supposed to be the same, where Bluto was in the Donkey Kong role and Popeye was in the Mario role. So if you kind of picture that, that kind of makes sense of what a Popeye game would look like, and it ended up becoming, Donkey Kong. So I don't know, just some weird. Again, you mentioned the weirdness of it in terms of the timing. I think it was just weird timing again, and how somehow, I don't know, this. I don't think it was the movie specifically, but this popularity and resurgence of the Popeye character led to kind of this blow up in terms of like arcade video games with Donkey Kong. So a little tie in there as well. You mentioned like the soundtrack. I have some mixed feelings on it. Like, I think some of the songs are okay. Some go on too long. Some it's just hard to understand, because again, like I said, like some of the Popeye dialogue from Robin Williams is hard to understand unless you're, you got that subtitle on. But I think also the makeup is really good too. Like, if you look at, we mentioned before Paul Dooley as Wimpy. Look, they added some extra padding to his stomach, obviously, but the mustache and the hat and the look of it all, they nailed all the facial hair correctly. So they did their job with the makeup in this movie, and especially Robin Williams' forearms. Like I mentioned last week, that dude looks like he's on steroids, but he's not. If this dude was wrestling in the WWF, they'd have to like put a pad on him. And then if he takes the pad off, it'd be a DQ because those forearms are massive. And if you look at his dad, Pappy, same forearm, so it runs in the family. I thought that was hilarious, kind of little detail there. That the forearms are just as just as huge as the father. So I thought that was a really good touch. But overall, I recommend this movie. It's a fun watch, and you got to also remember too, at this time, this was co-produced by Disney, and Disney, of course, at this time was not at the peak of its powers. It was kind of like trying to find some silver lining going into the 80s at this point, which is why they were doing co-productions with other studios at the time. This was like the second, I think. Dragon Slayer was the first with Paramount. This was the second one in a contract.
I have quite a list here of the Paramount Disney co-productions. Dragon
It's more
Slayer
than
is
two, huh?
second.
Maybe. Okay, wow. Go for it.
Well, there's some really obvious ones. You've got Alive, Face Off, Snake Eyes, A Civil Action, Runaway Bride, Bringing Out the Dead, and then you're gonna love that. You're gonna love this one, Brian. The Avengers and Iron Man 3. At the end of that deal,
I guess technically, yes, that is Disney Paramount.
That is the Disney because of the original deal.
Because that was the transition of their contractual agreement to switch to Disney. So
right.
I guess
they had a contractual obligation.
Yeah, they were obligated for the last two, and then after Iron Man 3, that was it. But Disney.
Terminator, Dark Fate, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny also was the most recent.
Oh, that's right, because I think Disney still has the merchandising rights or something like that, or something to do with that.
I'm not sure how
because
it all.
Of Disneyland Park and the Indiana Jones section, I'm guessing. But
yeah,
where did Disney go back a while? So, and it's weird because I consider this more of a Paramount movie than Disney because Paramount's all over the merchandising and all over the posters. I was kind of shocked to actually find out that Disney co-produced this, but at the same time, it's like Disney was just going for anything at this point, right? I mean, they were about to produce the Black Cauldron in the next couple of years, and that was a big mistake. So there's a lot of mistakes around this era that Disney was making, and I guess technically this was one of them, even though it did seem to give them a profit. But also want to mention Robert Evans. I think for people who don't know Robert Evans, look up a movie called The Kid Stays in the Picture. I watched that movie when I was younger, and that kind of influenced me in terms of like how to perceive what a real movie producer does and what his role is supposed to be, or their role is supposed to be. So I recommend checking that out. Just don't take the lessons from his love life. Just take the lessons from his producing life, because he's known for producing.
Oh man.
Yeah, he's known for producing The Godfather and having 7 wives. So just kind of figure that one out. But at the same time, this dude was like committed to the artists, I think, in terms of like letting the artists do their work, which is why I think a lot of movie directors like came and kind of gravitated towards Robert Evans. Because like if you look at this movie, clearly he gave Robert Altman a lot to play with and let him do a lot of his own stuff. And kind of the same way that Coppola was with Godfather, if you want to kind of make the comparison in terms of like Robert Evans letting directors be directors.
I think Robert Evans was much more protective of the artists. I don't know. I think he definitely tried to exert his influence, but I think the difference is that he always protected them from the studios, and he was an actual creative voice. I think one of the big problems now is the producer. This is the sense I get. I might be off base, but it doesn't seem like producers have as much of a creative spin on things. Whereas back then, it seems like Robert Evans was the type of producer who could enact creative decisions in terms of like budget and editing and scripting and casting. And I just don't know that you're really getting that these days. And it's really unfortunate, because I think this is a lesser industry because of that. But I think in terms of this movie, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that Robert Altman did have the creative latitude to kind of do what he wanted, because I think this movie is successful because Robert Altman got to do what he wanted. And we're never going to see a movie like this again. I don't even know that we're going to necessarily ever get a Popeye movie again. But I'm glad that we reviewed this. I think it was a good choice, because it's very different, but yet it feels very much like a piece of Robert Altman. Like, you feel the satire, you feel the difference, you feel the grunginess and the realism that he's bringing at the same time. Like, it's crazy to me that this movie simultaneously feels like a cartoon, but also feels realistic. And I don't know that another director could ever make this movie feel like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I said that, like, this feels like it's in the Nashville kind of universe, or like the McCabe and Mrs. Miller type universe, where it still seems like an ensemble cast talking over each other, but at the same time they're doing all these crazy bumps that the cartoon would, do. So,
Yes.
and then of course, like, at first my initial reaction to the octopus was like, wow, why did they introduce the octopus way earlier? Because that would have been cool and have this monster in the background. But really, it was just, there to, like, for fodder. Like, all you wanted to do is see that octopus go 50 feet in the air with one punch, and that's what you got, and that was it. So good stuff all around, because I'm a fan of kaiju stuff, so I was kind of like wanting more of that kaiju element. But again, it was just kind of like a throwaway thing, as like a way to show you how strong Popeye is. So overall, I give this a 7 out of 10. Like, it's a solid 7 out of 10 for me. I think if you're a kid, it's going to be kind of iffy on if whether or not you're going to follow this or not. But I think as you get older, it's definitely a movie that's like, wow, like, this was like an actual Hollywood movie made by an artist. It may not be for kids, but it's still like something done, out of pure creativity and like originality, and like, bringing cartoons to life. And it's kind of unheard of, like, in 1980, to kind of say that about cartoons, because like we said, like, not a lot of great history of like cartoons being translated to real life properties, as we've spoken on it before. Usually it's the opposite, but in this case, it's like they did a good job.
I would give this an 8 out of 10. I really like this movie for so many reasons. I think that it's such a fascinating watch, and I don't know that we're ever going to get something like this again, because it's so out of bounds and out of pocket, because for what movies are these days. Again, I think you're seeing a resurgence. You're going to see a resurgence in musicals, because Wicked was so damn popular and one of the few musicals to really hit big. I have a feeling studios are going to try to recapture that magic. But again, you have a character who is second or third tier animated character. The fact that the Looney Tunes can't even get a movie in theaters, barely. I know they have one coming out next year, but that poor Wiley, the poor Wiley Coyote movie. But Brian, next week we are going to be reviewing one of your picks for Robert Altman, and I know you are extremely excited for this.
The Player from 1992, and you mentioned Siskel and Ebert, because I've been on that kick watching all the YouTube videos I can find. The review on The Player is just so over enthusiastic. It's like a return to form, they said, for Robert Altman around this time. And I can tell you, like, this cast is unbelievable in terms of like just cameos alone, and it's like every name from like the 80s and 90s, early 90s that you can think of is in this movie. And not only that, there's like a murder mystery in the background that's like so intriguing, along with like being this like satire on Hollywood. So I remember watching this freshman year in college and just kind of being blown away, and so glad that I watched it in the big theater in Northridge, or at CSUN, the Cinematheque they have at the campus, and just totally like so glad I watched it on a big screen, because it's engrossing people, and it's like so hypnotic at times for some reason, and I think it's part of like that noir part of it all. So yeah, it's going to be a fun watch, because I'm telling you, when I get the reactions from Jerome, it's just going to be like one shocking text after another, whether it's like plot element or casting.
All right. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. We will be talking to you again next week, as we will finish Robert Altman month.